Today we begin where I ended yesterday, I believe, with ratification. So the homework that was due this morning are these two sheets here. So hopefully you've submitted those. They were Critical Thinking Skills 1 and 2. So please make sure that they have been submitted into your Canvas account. What we're looking at here is what we went over yesterday, I believe. So if you want to pause it and make sure that you look at your 7-3 checks and balances assignment, I just checked them in for completion, not for correction. So if you need to, I would pause the presentation now and double check your answers on this slide. And also, this was the one that gave some people pause and a little problem, is who is checking who. And so make sure that you can sort of see it this way. The reason why I changed it into kind of colors is that you can see that the framers of the Constitution spent a lot of time, the most time, and the largest portion of the entire Constitution on the legislative branch. That was the one that they were concerned with most. We pick up, and I want to share this again. This was in the Roots of the Constitution note packet, but it's a good thing for you to kind of sit and look at. Now, if you can and have the ability to print out or make it something on your presentation, I would kind of highlight where the arrows go away from a certain one. So let's say you pick yellow, outline the legislative branch in yellow, and then these arrows in yellow. And they would be, of course, the checks on both the executive branch and the judicial branch over here on the side. And the same could then be true for arrows leaving the executive branch, both up towards legislative and then over towards judicial. So again, I would sit at this and look at it, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask when you're here in class. I'm not sure if I covered federalism. Federalism is that sharing of powers, a division of responsibility between both federal and state governments. So if we look, that's why I put in roads. Roads are a good example of a concurrent power. That was one of your assignments on that 7-3 checks and balances. Both state and the federal government maintains roads. That's a concurrent power, a shared power. But if we look at this next slide, that's why I felt that this one was a good one. So national would be powers only the federal government or the national government has. And you can sort of see they're pretty substantial. Okay, they're the only ones that are allowed to make new states. They're the ones that are allowed to declare war. They're the ones that coin money. The state, on the other hand, they basically, well, the place that you are, they establish schools. So they're setting up school districts, not the federal government. And then here you can sort of see a shared one. Now the one that we could add is the idea of, like I said, maintaining roads. So this is the one that gets everyone's attention, is both of them can levy taxes. In class today, we went through, just for review and to understand this better, what letter, what branch would go with each one of these thoughts as far as the idea of checks and balances. So you can pause the presentation now, and then we can go through what the answers are to each one. Declaring laws unconstitutional, judicial. Veto, executive. Appointing federal judges, executive. Printing and coining money, legislative. Can pardon federal offenders, executive. Declare war, legislative. Regulate trade, legislative. Override a veto, legislative. Negotiate foreign treaties, executive. Raise an army, legislative. Declare presidential actions unconstitutional, judicial. Approve treaties, legislative. Commander-in-Chief of military, executive. Proposes laws, legislative. What we look at here is a picture, and it's not as current as it should be, but this is, of course, your United States Supreme Court justices. Okay, so this is the building that they go to work in. Now, you see that there are 9 justices. Now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, sadly, she was the one who passed away recently, and she has been replaced on the court. Remember, all of these are appointed by the president and then confirmed by the legislature, more specifically the United States Congress. So just going through just recent years here, this is Neil Gorsuch, and he was picked by Trump shortly after he came into office, and he was replacing a justice who had died. So the example here of checks and balances, the branch that checks the president's judicial nominee would be, of course, oops, that's misspelled, that would be the Senate. So here Neil Gorsuch is in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They interview him, ask him questions, and then they send their report on to the full Senate. This is Trump's second nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, going through the same congressional approval process. Finally, this is the one just recently, Amy Coney Barrett, going through congressional Senate approval, and she was approved. I have not seen a picture of the new Supreme Court, and it might be these COVID times, but that has not yet occurred. So just for fun, these are real-life examples. So as we look at this, which branch is checking which branch here? Well, if you read it right now, it says Judge blocks Trump's plan to bar immigrants who can't pay for health care. That would, of course, be the judicial branch against the executive branch. This is another example. During the Trump presidency, he was impeached by the Congress, so it would be the legislature over the executive. As the Constitution went out to all the states, groups began to form in either support or opposition to the Constitution. So the group that basically formed supporting it would be referred to as Federalist. Those that didn't like it, well, they get slapped with the term anti-Federalist. But pretty much they just did not agree with how strong the federal government would be under this new Constitution. So the two groups feared different things. So the Federalists, they feared disorder. So the events like Shays' Rebellion showed them what would happen if we have a too weak of a central or federalized government. So that's why they created a strong centralized government and gave the central government and federal government lots of power. The people who did not like that, they feared oppression by that very same government. So, like Great Britain had done to the American colonies during the Revolution. So, as we talked in class today, we mentioned that the events of this past summer, where you had protests and you had some disorder going on in cities and riots and protests, well, obviously people feared disorder. And then other people who felt that protest was part of a part of American right felt that the reaction, it was perhaps too much. It was oppression. So obviously you had two sides, even 240 years later, with differing thoughts. To drum up support for the new Constitution, leaders decided that they needed to get out some ways to explain the positives of this new government. And so what was sent out to the states and basically written was the things called the Federalist Papers. Now, these were 85 written essays defending the new Constitution. It was written kind of privately under a pseudonym by Publius was his name, but basically it was three men who wrote the Federalist Papers. Now, if you saw the musical Hamilton, you'd realize that Hamilton wrote the bulk of them. So, as we talk, the authors are James Madison, the father of the Constitution. He writes some. Hamilton, everybody knows what Hamilton looks like. Okay. And then John Jay, the same guy who we had talked about before, working things out with the Spanish and those type of events. He will also go on to become our first Chief Justice. So these are the men that write the Federalist Papers. And so the last thing brings us right back to where we started. We're going to talk in class, and I'm going to have one more screencast about ratification. Which states ratify and how and why. So that's where we end today.